The Volnorian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their ships were massive, their weapons were powerful, and their armies had never known defeat. When they found the small blue planet called Earth, they laughed. The humans had only been traveling among the stars for 300 years. They were young, they were weak, they were nothing. Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Around him floated the greatest fleet the Empire had ever assembled, 2,000 warships. Each one was the size of a small moon. Each one carried enough firepower to burn a planet to ash. The Admiral looked at the holographic display showing the human homeworld and smiled with all four of his mouths. "Send the message," he ordered. "Tell them to surrender. Tell them their species now belongs to the Volnorian Empire. They will serve us or they will die." The communication officer obeyed. The message traveled across space at speeds faster than light. It reached Earth in moments. The entire planet heard the Admiral's words. Every human on every colony world heard them too. The Volnorians waited for fear. They waited for begging. They waited for the humans to fall on their knees and accept their new masters. Instead, they received a single word in response. No. Admiral Zethkar blinked all six of his eyes. He looked at his officers. They looked back at him with confusion on their scaled faces. No species had ever refused the Volnorian Empire. Not once in 12,000 years. The Admiral felt something strange in his stomach. He did not recognize it as the beginning of fear. "Prepare the fleet," he commanded. "We will teach these creatures what happens when you defy the Empire." The massive armada moved toward Earth. Their engines burned bright against the darkness of space. Sensors scanned ahead, looking for the human defense fleet. What they found made the Volnorians laugh again. The humans had only 300 ships. They were small, they were crude. They looked like toys compared to the might of the Empire. This is their defense? One officer said with amusement, "This is what they send against us?" Admiral Zethkar nodded slowly. "Perhaps they do not understand what war truly means. We will educate them." The two fleets approached each other in the cold void between Mars and Jupiter. The Volnorian ships spread out in their traditional formation, a wall of metal and death that stretched for thousands of kilometers. The human ships stayed together in tight groups, moving in strange patterns that the Volnorians did not understand. "They fight like insects," Admiral Zethkar observed, "huddled together for warmth. Open fire when we are in range." The weapons officers prepared the main cannons. These were the pride of the Empire. Each shot could crack open a planet's crust. Each beam could burn through the strongest armor known to exist. The Volnorians had used these weapons to conquer 1,000 worlds. They had never failed. The human ships began to accelerate. At first, the Volnorians thought they were trying to run away, but the humans were not running. They were charging. Their small vessels shot forward at impossible speeds, faster than any ship the Volnorians had ever seen. Before the Empire's weapons could lock onto them, the humans were already among the fleet. "What is happening?" Admiral Zethkar demanded. "Track them. Destroy them." But the human ships were too fast. They danced between the massive Volnorian warships like small fish swimming around slow whales. And then they began to fire. The Volnorians expected weak weapons. They expected their shields to easily stop whatever the humans threw at them. They were wrong. The first shots punched through the shields like they were not even there. The second shots tore open the armor of the nearest warship. The third shots found the engine core. The explosion lit up the darkness of space. Admiral Zethkar watched in shock as one of his finest ships died in a ball of fire. Then another. Then another. The humans were not fighting like any enemy the Empire had ever faced. They did not stay still. They did not fight in formation. They moved constantly, striking and retreating, never in the same place twice. "Return fire," the Admiral screamed. "All ships, return fire." The Velnorian fleet opened up with everything they had. Beams of energy filled the void. Missiles launched by the thousands. The space around them became a storm of destruction. But the humans were not there. They had already moved. They were behind the fleet now, striking at the engines of the rear ships. 3 more warships exploded. Admiral Zethkar felt the strange feeling in his stomach grow stronger. He was beginning to understand now. He was beginning to realize the terrible mistake the Empire had made. The humans were not weak. They were not primitive. They had simply been waiting. They had been learning. They had been preparing. "Admiral," one of his officers said with fear in his voice, "we are detecting new signals. More human ships are arriving." The holographic display updated. What Zethkar saw made his blood turn cold. From every direction, more human vessels were appearing. They had been hiding in asteroid fields, behind moons, in the shadow of gas giants, thousands of them. They had let the Empire think they only had 300 ships. It was a trap, the greatest trap in the history of galactic warfare. "All ships, retreat," Admiral Zethkar ordered. "Fall back to the rally point." But it was too late. The human ships surrounded the Velnorian fleet like a closing fist. They attacked from above, below, and every side. Their weapons never stopped firing. Their pilots never stopped moving. Each human ship fought like 10 vessels. Each human commander seemed to know exactly what the Velnorians would do before they did it. On Earth, General Sarah Chun watched the battle from the command center. Her face showed no emotion. She had planned this moment for years. She had studied every recording of Velnorian conquests. She had learned how they fought. She had found their weaknesses, and now she was using every one of them. "Focus fire on their communication ships," she ordered calmly. "Cut them off from each other, then take out their engines. I want them dead in space." Her commanders obeyed. One by one, the Velnorian warships went dark. Their communications failed. Their engines died. They drifted helplessly while human ships circled them like predators around wounded prey. Admiral Zethkar stood on his bridge as fire raged around him. Half his crew was dead. The Eternal Dominion was crippled. He could see, through the burning holes in his ship, the remains of his beautiful fleet. Ships that had conquered worlds were now nothing but debris. Bodies of his soldiers floated in the void by the millions. "How?" he whispered. "How is this possible?" A voice came over his communication system. It was a human voice, female, calm. "This is General Sarah Chun of the Earth Defense Force. Your fleet is destroyed. Your invasion has failed. You asked us to surrender. This is our answer." Another explosion rocked the Eternal Dominion. More systems failed. Admiral Zethkar fell to his knees. In 12,000 years, the Velnorian Empire had never known defeat. They had believed themselves to be the masters of the galaxy. They had believed no one could stand against them. They had been wrong. The human ships did not stop. They hunted down every remaining Velnorian vessel. They showed no mercy. They gave no quarter. Every ship that tried to surrender was captured. Every ship that tried to fight was destroyed. By the time it was over, not a single Velnorian warship remained in human space. General Chun watched the final moments of the battle. She allowed herself a small smile. The Empire had sent their best fleet, 2,000 of their most powerful warships. They had expected an easy victory. They had expected to add another conquered species to their collection. Instead, humanity had sent their fleet back to them in pieces. The message traveled across the galaxy faster than any ship could fly. Every species that lived under Velnorian rule heard what happened. They heard how the young species from the small blue planet had done the impossible. They heard how the humans had destroyed the greatest fleet the Empire had ever assembled. And for the first time in 12,000 years, they began to hope. On the Velnorian homeworld, the Emperor received the news in silence. His advisors waited for his rage. They waited for him to order more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. They waited for him to vow revenge against the humans. But the Emperor said nothing for a long time. He stared at the reports. He looked at the images of his destroyed fleet. He read the names of the dead admirals, the lost ships, the ended careers. Finally, he spoke. "What are these creatures?" he asked quietly. "What have we awakened?" No one had an answer. Far away, on Earth, the sun was rising over the Pacific Ocean. Children were going to school. People were going to work. Life continued as it always had. Most humans did not fully understand what had happened in the darkness between planets. They knew there had been a battle. They knew their soldiers had won. That was enough for them. General Chun stood alone on a balcony, watching the sunrise. She was tired. The weight of what she had done pressed on her shoulders. She had saved her species. She had killed millions of enemies. She had changed the course of galactic history. And tomorrow, she would have to do it again. Because the Empire would not stop. They would send more ships. They would try again. But humanity would be ready. They had always been ready. From the moment humans first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there, they had been preparing. Not with weapons or ships or technology, but with something more important. With the belief that they would never surrender. With the knowledge that no enemy, no matter how powerful, could break them. The Volnorian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had never known defeat. Until they met humanity. And now, for the first time in their long history, they knew fear. They knew what it meant to face an enemy that would not bow. They knew what it meant to fight a species that would rather die than submit. The galaxy was watching. Every conquered world, every enslaved species, every being who had ever dreamed of freedom was watching. And they were beginning to understand something important. The age of the Empire was ending. The age of humanity was just beginning. In the debris field that had once been the greatest fleet in the galaxy, a single Valnorian escape pod drifted among the wreckage. Inside, a young officer clung to life. He had seen everything. He had watched his fleet die. He had watched the humans tear through the Empire's finest ships like they were made of paper. When rescue ships finally found him weeks later, they asked him what happened. They asked him to describe the enemy. They asked him to explain how the humans had won. He looked at them with empty eyes and spoke only 4 words. They were waiting for us. And somewhere, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, humanity continued to wait. For whatever came next, for whatever enemy dared to challenge them. They would be ready. They would always be ready. Because that was what it meant to be human.